Hey, what is going on, guys? It's Johnny and welcome to another Zenless Zone Zero video. First of all, I hope you guys had a happy holidays and a happy new year. Crazy to think how fast 2023 already went by, but in today's video, since the second equalizing test for Zenless is over, let's discuss about my experience with the game, the good and the bad. I honestly had a lot of fun with the beta, but there were definitely some things that I feel like could be improved on as well, but the overall experience was very positive. Starting out, the game's art style is really captivating and looks really good. Characters are well designed and the environment is gorgeous, taking a more realistic approach to look more modern. In terms of the UI, it's really simple and clean, which makes it feel beginner-friendly and not as overwhelming. The game does feature cutscenes, but unlike Genshin and Honkai Star Rail, which are based in the open world, Zenless is side by side and the setting doesn't change as much. They do of course have cinematic cutscenes for key parts, but most of the time it will be the side-to-side cutscenes. Some narration are also presented in a comic book, making the style of the game very unique. Aesthetics aren't everything though, and with Zenless, one of the most important features of the game is without a doubt combat. If you're a fan of fast-paced action combat, then Zenless might be something that interests you because the game does promote and rely on players having good reaction time and hands. Since the game doesn't have designated healers, relying on dodging attacks is going to be crucial to survivability because HP carries over across multiple battles in the same holo. The combat also feels very smooth and interactive, always making players feel engaged, especially during boss battles. Those are the most fun. For the controls, it's pretty straightforward and similar to Genshin, each character having their own normal attacks, skills, and ultimates. Agents also have different types and elements with different abilities. For example, Soldier 11, who's a slash agent, has this really cool block animation when you do a perfect assist, which is my personal favorite. We're not gonna go too in depth with it in this video, but there are additional mechanics related to dodging and switching characters that are included in the character's kit, which will be important to master and understand. Something I think a lot of players will find useful is the VR training room, which allows players to practice freely without worrying about missions. You can also customize enemies and their behavior, which can save a lot of time since bosses are generally at the end of holos for some quick practice or warming up. Along with combat, another focus is of course going to be the story, like every other Hoyoverse title. The story is engaging and the end of each chapter always brings up more questions and feels sort of mysterious. Almost every character that was available during the beta made an appearance in the main story, allowing you to learn more about them and the personalities, which is good because in Genshin, some of the characters don't quite make it into the main story, but instead events and character quests. To be fair, Genshin has a lot of characters. Surprisingly, the MC also gets a lot of spotlight, having all of their lines of voice during story cutscenes, giving Wise and Belle a lot of personality, which is actually something I really love. Regardless of who the player chooses at the beginning, both characters will still be featured and make an appearance and everything. In Genshin, it's kind of understandable since the goal is to find your sibling, but in Star Rail, the other practically doesn't exist. Now, if all this isn't for you and you're not interested in the story, the cool thing is that there is a skip button to jump straight into the combat. This is a really good feature for players that mainly want to focus on progressing their account because the story can be pretty long. Change your mind or accidentally hit the skip button? No problem, because with the story archives, players can revisit the stories anytime. This is something we mentioned in our top 5 changes series for Genshin because story is such an important part of the game and limited events are connected. For example, during the Iridori Festival, Venti met Saintcho for the very first time, and later on during the Lantern Raid did recall meeting at that time, so it's great to see this feature implemented into Zenless. We'll have to see if they add limited time events too, but regardless, having a story archive for the main quest and character quests is great, so players can revisit these anytime. The one thing that sucks is that there isn't an autoplay feature, and for me personally, I enjoy sitting back and watching the story on autoplay. Just more relaxing and 99% less clicks. Luckily though, spending your energy has never been easier. Unlike in Genshin where you need to wait certain days to get specific materials to build characters or weapons, minus Sundays, or in Honkai Star Rail where certain things can be locked behind story, Zenless has a simpler system that has everything in one place. The VR testing machine. This testing machine is an Archon Sen because players have the power to customize what they want to farm, making it more efficient and less time consuming since you can farm from multiple different mats in one run. The more materials added, the more battery charge it consumes, aka resin and trailblaze power, so you can literally do 2 runs runs and be done for the day. One thing to mention though is that energy is extremely rare, and yes, I know it's rare in Genshin and Star Rail too, but in Zenless, it consumes battery charge to progress through certain parts of the story, which is something we've never seen before. This is something I hope Hoyoverse will remove since energy is already scarce and used for progressing your account by building characters, weapons, etc. In 6th Street, which is where the MCs live, there are multiple stores, one of which is a coffee shop that restores 60 battery charge once a day. Definitely drink up, and while this does help, story should be an activity you can do whenever you want, without restrictions. During the beta, I also encountered an event which required the player to reach a certain point in the story to unlock, or reach a certain internat level, which is equivalent to Adventure Rank and Trailblaze level. This isn't something that Genshin has to worry about since they have the quick start feature, and while Star Rail events are currently locked behind story, at least they aren't locked behind the energy system. This is something players will have to be aware of, because if you wait too long to do the story, you might miss out on some events since you can't do it in one session, not without spending film or ether batteries to restore a battery charge. Each main quest and side quest also has missions you can complete to get some extra rewards. Completing these on your first attempt would be ideal, because rerunning the quest will unfortunately cost energy. It's only 5, but these could stack up. Again, I hope they remove this system because as a story enthusiast, if they charge me resin to do story, I'd be one upset gamer. I'm also a pretty big procrastinator and sometimes do events last minute. For example, the last story one took like 5 to 6 hours to complete with the prerequisite quest, and I had to do this on 2 accounts. Bless it didn't cost any Trailblaze power. Something that is really cool and could honestly save some energy is the material conversion system, because in Zenless, you're able to convert materials upwards and downwards. For example, in Genshin and Star Rail, you are only able to combine 3 of the lower tiers to create 1 higher tier, but can't do the reverse. This might not matter as much because extra mats will be used eventually, but this will help to get the exact amount and save energy within the day, so a pretty convenient system. Now, if you run out of energy and want something to do, there is an arcade which has minigames and a leaderboard that players can compete in for that #1 title. Just a nice little add-on that can net you some rewards, and there are some limited time events that promote the arcade system for additional rewards, but if you're not a fan of minigames, then that kinda stings because you might feel obligated to play. In terms of exploration, it's pretty limited, which is kind of expected since the game mainly focuses on combat and takes form in 2 ways, the overworld and hollows. Starting with the overworld, while there isn't much, it's pretty relaxing and not stressful since there's no treasure chests or hidden items. You honestly just walk around to visit the many stores and talk to people for quests. Later on, we do unlock our very own random play minivan, which lets us teleport to new areas. The van is located at a specific location though, behind our store, and could be a little inconvenient to access, but luckily there's a quick travel option in the menu, which I don't see why players wouldn't use. Overall, very simple and straightforward, but if you're looking for an extensive experience similar to Genshin or honestly even Star Rail, then you won't find it here. Something that could be a make or break deal for a lot of players is actually the hollow exploration. We mentioned previously that Zenless focuses a lot on combat, and while that is true, you can't engage in combat until you actually solve some puzzles. Can't just test that brain, gotta test those brains too. This could be a little frustrating for some, or at least a little less exciting if they just want to experience combat, because I would say time spent inside a hollow is split around 50-50, give or take. Obviously, it depends on how strong your team is and whether you get stuck on a puzzle, but the point is that the puzzles and combat go hand in hand. So if you dislike puzzles, you might want to be careful. Me personally, I don't mind the puzzles and some of them are pretty entertaining, and I think the combat experience is so fun that it's worth it, even if I was stuck inside a puzzle for an hour. To be fair, in one of the endgame content, Hollow Zero, exploration isn't about puzzles, but more about encountering events and decision making, and isn't as long, but the overall system of moving through televisions remains. As a gacha game, it does follow its predecessors in most ways, with the exception of having 3 different things to pull for in a banner: characters, W engines, which are essentially weapons, and bang boos. In Zenless, you actually have a party of 3 agents instead of the traditional 4, but bang boos essentially serve as your 4th companion that we'll have to pull for. Having 3 different things makes it seem a bit much, and during my polls for the beta, it was actually pretty challenging to get an A rank character. Even if you ignore the raid since having more types of things in the same banner makes it harder to get what you want. I'm not entirely sure what the solution would be here, because while I would like it to be more separate, we definitely don't want to see Bang Boo exclusive banners, since that would mean more spending. Curious to see how they would do this for limited time S-rank characters, W engines, and Bang Boos, because in the beta there was only a limited time character banner, which we beat the 50-50 for. Something that I do really like though, and I'm surprised it's not implemented in Genshin and Star Rail yet, is the pity counter, which shows your current pity for S ranks and A ranks. A very nice feature that makes it easier to keep track of your pity without having to surf through your history. Lastly, something I encountered a lot of and thought was a bit unnecessary was the day and night system. Now don't get me wrong, I think it's really cool to see the city during the daytime and nighttime, but when it restricts me or stops me from what I was doing, that can be a bit frustrating. This is something you encounter quite often as you're spending your energy, and while it was cute the first couple times, having to constantly go through it seems repetitive. Even if it is short and quick, it shouldn't stop your current activities. Similar to Genshin, we can freely explore day or night. I understand that they're trying to go for a more realistic approach, but not everyone goes to bed at night. During certain parts of the story, you are locked in and have to progress to a certain point to freely do things. One time, I wanted to log on and quickly spend my battery charge so it wouldn't cap. Typical, but was forced into the next part of the story before I could spend my energy. Overall, the game definitely has a lot of improvements it could make, but I genuinely had a lot of fun during the beta and can't wait for the official launch. Quality of life changes are always being implemented for Genshin and Star Rail, so I'm optimistic Hoyoverse will do the same for Zenless. As we mentioned, the game is really focused on combat and skill expression, so for those who want a challenge, it might be worth checking out. The combat really reminds me of Kingdom Hearts, which is my favorite game of all time, in the sense that you feel in control and every move is made with intention. Eventually, if you master the combat in different enemy patterns, you can do those crazy no damage challenges, which are very exciting to watch. Something we haven't mentioned yet is the music, which you really have to give them credit for, because they have so many tracks that hype you up and just make you want to play better. I'ma kick your... Alrighty guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Don't forget to also turn that notification bell so you don't miss on any newly released videos. I've been Johnny D, and until next time, I'll catch you guys in the next one.